We are live. We are live. Happy, beautiful day. This is Pete Cohen, and I'm super excited to be presenting today to you. We're talking about the truth about stress and burnout, the crisis that we find ourselves in right now in the workplace, but also just in the world. And I'm super excited to be presenting to you today, not on my own. We have a special guest, Joy Langley, who is the author of the awesome book, Navigating Stress. She's also a coach and a therapist. It's going to be awesome. Super excited to be sharing this time and this space with you. I think this is one of the most important subjects we should be talking about. And we're not just going to talk about it. We want to look at where we kind of are, what some of the data is showing us. We're going to be talking about why we need an overhaul of the way that we kind of are managing stress, how we are showing up in the workplace, and how we can create cultures that really encourage people to feel comfortable about where they are, how they're feeling, where they're going. And then we're going to look at some actionable steps. I also just want to say a massive shout out to Trigger Hub, because today is brought to you in collaboration with Trigger Hub. If you don't know anything about Trigger Hub, please make sure that you do. We will be sharing some more information about that. But in essence, Trigger Hub really is setting the way in helping organizations revolutionize their mental health services, as well as creating environments where people could speak about how they're feeling before these things become a problem, before a crisis emerges. So get ready. Let's just do a little bit of housekeeping before I introduce Joy to you. Please, this is for about 60 minutes. If you have any questions, please use the Q&A feature. There will be a recording of this as well, so that we'll send out to everybody. You might want to take some notes. Look, if anything triggers you in what we're talking about, then you might just want to take a moment. Also, just let us know, and make sure you just have fun, because this is what this is all about. We're creating a space today to really have an open conversation around stress and burnout. Actually, just in the chat, just let us know, have you ever burnt out? If you have someone in your life who's ever burnt out, or someone who has ever suffered from excessive amount of stress, just let us know, because I think one of the things I think is important to start off with is to know that, look, you're not alone. Our world has completely changed. And I think now what we are going to be doing to start off with is just to actually just stop. Just stop. And take a moment, take a pause, which is probably one of the most important things I think we can ever do. Just stop, take a pause before we move forwards. And hopefully by the end of the time that you spend with us, you are looking at stress differently. Maybe you have some things that you're actually going to go away and do, and your life will be better because of this time that we spent together. So let me introduce to you Joy. I came across Joy on one of those platforms. You might have heard of it. It's called LinkedIn. And I think she started following me first. And then I started following her, and then I was like, hang on, this is someone I really want to look at what they're doing, because they're really doing some, I would say, revolutionary work, some great work, authentic work, genuinely helping people. Joy has an incredible story to share. It actually mirrors my story as well in many ways. She is a coach. She is a therapist, and she is the author of the awesome book, Navigating Stress. Joy, thank you so much for joining me today. How are you?
My pleasure to join you, Pete. I'm very well, thank you. It's midday in the UK, so I'm fully awake, which is a good thing.
Absolutely, yeah. We're definitely going to be creating some positive energy in this room today. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about your story? Because your story is, when I heard it, I was like, okay, this is something that I can see why you do what you do. And I want to commend you for having the courage that you've had to face the challenges that you've faced in your life. Why don't you just share a little bit with our audience here today, a little bit about your story?
Yes, well, my story is long, broad and deep, but I'm from West Indian parentage. So I've got 2 brothers, 2 sisters. And every Christmas, when I was sort of 10 years onwards, my mum got depression. So we didn't really understand it. And we ended up just having terrible Christmases. And I still don't like Christmas to this day. But my mum's own DNA line, there's lots of stuff around mental health problems. So I've got schizophrenia, I've got people who've committed suicide, and yeah, and it just goes on. With my mum, I suspect she had menopause going on, but it wasn't a diagnosed thing back then, and probably depression. She had 5 children. I mean, that's enough to drive anyone around the bend, but she did all right. So I've got my own stigmas and fears around mental health, which I've carried through into my 20s, where I experienced depression myself. So I understood what it was, but I still didn't know what to do with it. And it certainly wasn't something that I wanted my mum to be fully aware of, because she was ashamed of it. But it encouraged me to at least think about mental health and it being very, very real. And for me, I linked it to becoming depressed when I was doing things that I was unhappy with. So I came out of university with a nice degree, chemistry and business, didn't do anything with it, couldn't get a job that I wanted, and ended up doing secretarial work, so personal assistant and all that kind of stuff. But I hated it from the minute I got there, and I had to spend another year with each company just to make my CV look good. And I just got more and more depressed, and quite, I would say, looking back at it, suicidal, but I never did anything. I would stand by the railway tracks and look at the railway tracks and think, yeah, that looks really exciting. But fast forward, I did end up doing a job in the music business, which I loved, with a partner, an ex-partner, and I met Beyonce when she was in Destiny's Child. So, and I realized that I have to do jobs that I enjoy. Otherwise, I get depressed. So it wasn't a question of should I or shouldn't I. It was find things that you love, Joy, because if you're doing that, you'll be fine. So that's where I ended up work-wise. And I had my son, and my son got to 23. And in 2018, unfortunately, he took his life. So suicide was another thing that then revisited my life in a very shocking way. But I'm a therapist. Thank God that I had those skills behind me, because they've certainly helped me. And since then, the whole world of therapy has opened up. I've met a lot of people that have got stuff going on around them in that field, because they say you attract the people that you're meant to. But for me, mental health is front and center. Now I'm working with a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, helping them in a more wider sense, because they are the walking wounded, like we all are. But we have businesses, and businesses are stressful, but in a very, very different way to when you're an employee. So that's kind of me in a nutshell, Pete.
I love what you just said there about the walking wounded, because I think if we all just stop again and realize, are we all wounded? Well, I think we are, through what we've gone through in our lives. But if you think about what we've all been through over the last few years, there's no question that the world has changed, and many people are feeling stressed, burnt out. And this is a subject very, very dear to my heart. For those of you that don't know who I am 53 on Saturday, and I've spent the last, 27, 28 years, dare I say, working in the field of performance psychology. I'm the author of 20 books on things like fear busting, habit busting. I've coached and mentored some of the most incredible individuals, leaders in business, Olympic champions, and just everyday people, just like you and me, people who are striving to be better. And I just think that there is a climate where people are speaking more openly and honestly now about how they're thinking and feeling, but there's a lot of work to be done. I think, as you were alluding to, in your parents' generation, my parents' generation, people didn't reveal anything about themselves, because, especially in the workplace, because you're showing a weakness. But as we talk about being walking and wounded, I think we're all wounded. In fact, Joy, one of the things I wanted to ask you about your book, but one of the things I have found, I was in complete denial about when COVID came. I was in complete denial because I moved to be near, I lived near an airport here in the UK. I was traveling all over the world, and I was in denial about the fact that the world was changing, and it hasn't really gone back to how it was before. I was flying all over the world, speaking, training, coaching. And what was really interesting is speaking to people who are working in HR, I was hearing the same thing, which is people adapt very quickly. Human beings are very, very adaptable. And this is really important for us to understand. We are adaptable. We're incredible. Things happen to humans, and we tend to find a way through in many cases. But what's the impact of that adaptation? And the adaptation for a lot of people, whether it was working from home or people passing away who died, or there's just the stress of living, there is an impact. And a lot of people aren't really talking about this. And if they are, they're paying lip service to it. And if you pay lip service to mental health, then don't expect anything to ever change. And I just want to reiterate one thing again about Trigger Hub. Trigger Hub 100% solely committed to providing roadmaps to organizations to create those cultures where it's not only just acceptable, but people are not just recovering from perhaps mental health challenges, but there's this mental wellness. There's this growth kind of mentality of people wanting to be better than they currently are, which is something we'll talk about towards the end when we talk about actionable steps. But let's just talk, Joy, about your book, Navigating Stress. Why did you write that book? What was the trigger that encouraged you to write that book?
Well, I think I've always wanted to write a book, Pete, and I think all my life, because I'm a bookworm. If you came to my house now, even the room that you can't see on screen, it's like being in a library. And I've always wanted to have a library, but I am surrounded by books, and mental health obviously is close to my heart. It would not necessarily be my first book, I think, on mental health, but Trigger actually approached me during the COVID period. And they asked me to write a book, a different title, funnily enough, but around mental health. And then COVID struck and it all went very quiet. So I thought, oh, well, okay. And then they came back to me like 7 months later and I thought, oh, okay, I'll do a book, but not the one that you originally wanted me to do. How about stress? And they said, yeah. So the book then just came about through timing, you know, and also the fact that I've just been immersed in this world and it just made sense. But I wanted to be simple. Everything that I do, Pete, has to be simple. Even though I love words, I love books, keeping it simple is where it's at, because what's the point of complicating it? Language is meant to be understood. It's not meant to confuse or to create different tribes. So the book was really just to help people to go from A to B, understand a little bit about what stress is, the whole physiological thing that happens regardless of whether you want it to or not, and then what you can do perhaps to stop it. But just not allowing you to give yourself a break and recognizing that, oh, I haven't brought this on me. There are internal things that happen to me, which is the body's response, which the brain is playing with me and thinking there's a fire, there's a flood, whatever it does, likes to do. But I can override this. So I wanted to give people that clear understanding that, yes, this is what the body does, but you can still get back in the driving seat and at least assess whether you should run because there's a lion or just ignore it because it's just a shadow of something in the corner. So for me, it was about just giving you real practical steps. Because
thank you. Well, I know it's what
I would have wanted, to be quite honest, in my 20s, Pete. I would have definitely dearly wanted that. And I didn't get that, not from my mum, who pretended it wasn't happening, and just generally feeling ashamed and having to hide it. So it was very isolating and actually quite dangerous.
Well, thank you for writing the book. I know it's been really well received. I've listened to a couple of the things that you've done on LinkedIn, and I've heard what people have said about how you have actually helped them. You know, I think if we look at the way we live, and this is the first thing we want to look at now, which is just kind of, let's look at what's going on. If we look at how most people are feeling today, well, a question you could ask them is, how do you feel about where you are? I mean, that's maybe seems like a strange question, but I think sometimes people are unaware of actually how they're feeling, and how human beings, yes, we have the ability to be stressed, that fight and flight response that can kick in, or the flight and the freeze response where we don't actually know what to do. These are natural responses that we can activate at any one time. But what's really interesting, and we'll talk more about this a little bit later, is around that this software that we run when we get stressed, it's affecting the hardware of our bodies, you know, and that's why for years, I'm sure we all remember hearing many years ago about how stress was related to heart disease, but we also know how stress is related to many other physical conditions in the body, but also the psychological impact. And when we look at how people are feeling, well, we can just look a little bit at some of the data. And Joy, I'd love to hear from you just in terms of what you see, what you have observed. But some of the data around this is really interesting. And there obviously is a distinction between stress and burnout. I think most people probably know that it's excessive stress that leads to burnout. But I'm just going to reel off some of the data here. Women, 46% are more likely than men, 37% to burnout. That's an interesting conversation in itself as to why that is. 10,243 full-time desk-based workers hold in 6 major economies. 42% reported burnout. There's so much data here. I'm just going to highlight a few other things here. This was a Deloitte survey on burnout, and it revealed 91% of workers say having an unmanageable amount of stress or frustration negatively impacts the quality of their work. I think if we really wake up to the fact that people are stressed, what impact is that having on their ability? When we get stressed, everything seems to shut down. We're not as aware. We're definitely not as productive as we can be. The NICE study revealed, this was a study that was done not too long ago, a National Institute for Health and Care Excellence revealed in a study that 13.7 million working days are lost each year in the UK because of work-related stress, anxiety, and depression, costing 28.3 billion a year. I mean, this goes on and on and on. And again, you know, how important is it for us to look at data, maybe just to look at how we actually are right here, right now. Joy, what have you kind of observed in terms of how people are feeling about where they are right now, specifically in the workplace?
Well, I speak to business owners, but I also attract a lot of employees who are working in companies. So on the quiet, I think everyone's really worried at the moment. The economy's been a big problem, but the COVID kind of kickstarted the worry and then the relief. I had a lot of people that said to me they didn't want to go back to work. And I thought, why? I said, you're at home, your children, you've got to do it. But they can manage their lives better. They can manage the shopping, they can manage the kids, and as long as they've got somewhere dedicated where they can work, then they really felt a relief from working from home. But for me, I've got people who've been working from home who obviously get quite lonely. So even me at the beginning, when I was working self-employed, the isolation of working on your own is an awful lot. It's quite, drove me around the bend a bit. I thought I had to get out, I had to do something. But working from home, people do like it. The commute, people don't like it. Being around people that are annoying at work, they don't like that either. And then also, if they're not doing jobs that they enjoy, I'd like to say, Pete, it's soul destroying. So mind, body, spirit, we forget, as you said, that this head is attached to this body and that the two cycle together, they work together. The head talks to the body talks to the head. It's harmonious. So we've got our own balance going on inside us, homeostasis going on inside of us, but we forget that the brain tells the body things and the body tells the brain things. We've lost that somewhere. And I've been told that I'm too much in my head. Yeah, I do spend an awful lot of time thinking, and I forget that all this worry and this doubt and this stress, it impacts my body. You mentioned the impact on heart disease, but it's an impact on everything, Pete. It's the autoimmune system goes out of kilter. The actual cells in your body get affected. So that's why we become ill. So for me, when I look at the bigger picture, I suppose, of why are people more stressed, it's got to be linked to, for me, unhappiness. Unhappiness at the things that they do with the time that they have during the day. So what you choose to fill that with, if you want to call it work, I love my work. So I know that I have to do things that make me feel good. But I have been in jobs where I've been doing things which have been very pointless. Someone pays me, I turn up, I do it, I leave. No satisfaction, rather not be there, but I need to put a roof over my head.
Well, you know, this kind of crosses over a little bit into why there needs to be an overhaul, which we'll talk about in a moment. But thank you for what you just said there. There was some really interesting points of view, but also just, you know, obviously this is from your experience. And I know that you're someone who's really curious to actually look at what is going on. And I think we need to stop and just realize that what we've all been through, I say all of us, because I think it is all of us in some way, shape or form. And the way we're living our life, it's not healthy. It's not going to last. There's going to be more problems unless we decide to be the change that we want to see in the world. And I often cite Gandhi a lot. You know, Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world. he knew that he had to reinvent himself. He knew he had to become a different person. And I think that's what some organizations are doing this. They're reinventing themselves and becoming, as you said before we went live here, about becoming just much more human focused. Who invented work? It was invented by the Romans, who got people to do things that they didn't want to do. And we know that many organizations exist to maximize shareholder value, but even shareholders are looking at the way organizations are functioning and going, how are our people feeling? How can we get our people to feel more valued? And I think as we cross over into the second component of what we want to talk about is an overhaul. Why do we need an overhaul of the way we are looking at stress and burnout? I think the first thing I wanted to ask you about this was, the Great Resignation, where a lot of people it seems have just going, well, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't feel that there's anything here for me. I'd rather just leave because I don't feel valued. I'd love to hear from you, Joy, about that, the Great Resignation, and why more and more people are kind of going, hang on a second, what's in this for me? I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
Yes, well, the Great Resignation, I love the title. It makes a really good blockbuster film, doesn't it? Like the Terminator, the Great Resignation. So I love the title of it, but really people were voting with their feet. And I don't know if this Great Resignation or this quiet quitting, they call it that as well, has been happening for a while, but I was quiet quitting quite a lot of jobs in my 20s.
Yeah.
By virtue of me just hating every minute of it. So I would just hand in my resignation and move on to something else. So quiet quitting, this revolution that we're talking about. But human beings, thank God, are waking up to the fact that there's more to life than whatever they're doing at the moment. And I don't think I want to have a go at employers for providing a place for someone to come and earn some money, because my business is growing. I'm taking on board VAs and other people. So I'm becoming that employer. So, you mentioned about culture, but human beings do want to be somewhere where they feel valued, where they feel as though they belong, where they feel a sense of purpose and meaning. All of these lovely words, which I don't know if it's the employer's responsibility to provide it, because when I started up what I'm doing, I will attract hopefully people that are involved in mental health and well-being. But if I didn't, and I still took them on, that would be on me, Pete. I couldn't possibly expect them to be happy. And there'd be no point me having a go at them because they want to be a car mechanic or they want to be a chef, but they're working for me. I mean, I suspect I would be able to see there's a little bit of incongruence between what they want and what I'm providing. But money is the thing that oils the world, and we all need money to live. So we have to work out how do we get that in our own way. And there is a personal responsibility on the employer, just a person. There's a responsibility on them to find out what they want in life and to find something that matches it. But we know that there are jobs and then there are people, and there are spaces like square pegs into round holes, and that's the way of the world.
I think what's really important, thank you. I like the quiet quitting. I've not heard of that before. I think one of the things I observed, I worked with a company, Capita, and the actual MD had some mental health challenges. And at the conference, he actually got up and spoke about that. And what was really fascinating was the amount of people that they didn't know, and started to create an environment where it's like, okay for people to go, well, hang on, I'm not the only one. And it's okay and it's safe. I think what we find in a lot of organizations is that people don't want to speak out because if they show a weakness, that might be used against them. But plus also we know the challenges that many organizations face. They're having to cut costs and it's difficult and challenging. But I really like what you said there about, why people do what they do. And I think a lot of people, maybe they think they do what they do because of, they want to earn money. And of course, as you said, money does make the world go round, but what makes people go round maybe faster, better, is when they feel valued. And there's three elements I just want to touch on here very briefly, and that's autonomy, mastery, and purpose. When we look at what most people want, and we've seen this in organizations where we talk to people, and again, this is the work that really does make a difference. when people have autonomy, you have an environment where they feel they can be themselves, they can speak up and they can speak from the heart, and they're not going to be shot down from just being themselves, as opposed to putting on a mask and just being like everybody else, another brick in a wall. They want mastery. People want to get better at what they do. They want to feel that they're making progress in what they do. And the last element is purpose. They just want to feel that there's a purpose to what they do every single day. Because let's face it, again, most people spend more time at work than they do with, everybody else. And I want to throw this back at you, Joy, if that's okay. I'd love to just hear from your point of view. Why do you think there needs to be an overhaul in the way organizations are dealing with stress and burnout?
Well, in a way, Pete, I think you just said it, that our need for autonomy and mastery of any task that we do, and this feeling, a sense of purpose. Why, on a big philosophical level, Pete, why am I here? And I must admit that was the question that went round and round my head in my 20s when I was depressed, because I couldn't work out why, from being a very happy, let's say, university student, very, very purpose-led, got a goal in mind, got to get that degree, boom, enter the workplace and total depression. It was literally like, is this what I've been moving towards? I was really shocked. I was really upset, and there was nothing I could do about it, because apparently that was just the way it was, Joy. And I wish someone had told me that. But anyway, so back to the question, Pete. You're gonna have to remind me of the question. I'm getting carried away in my own head here.
Just like why you think there needs to be an overhaul, the way this has been dealt with in the past and how it needs to be dealt with now, if we want to create better working environments for people.
The overhaul has to happen because people get unhappy, and the unhappiness can be classified as varying degrees of mood changes. For me, it was depression. There's also anxiety, there's stress that is triggered because people are on edge, worried about things, fearful. And then there are obviously medical conditions that are perhaps a bit deeper than just a mood change. We've got bipolar disorder, we've got schizophrenia, we've got personality, personality disorders, all kinds of things. But human beings have a brain. I think that when it's happy, we're all good. When it's unhappy, it tells us so. So for me, my depression was always like a big message, a big calling card, which was, Joy, you're not happy. And unfortunately, I had to override that, because I'd been trained and conditioned that, Joy, you go to work. I've got a very, very good work ethic. My father worked solidly for all his life, 5 children. He just worked really, really hard, factory working. He worked night shifts, day shifts. They really messed his brain up, I think, with his shift work, but he just kept going. So I've got a really strong work ethic. So it was hard to sort of question that my unhappiness and my depression was actually due to my work. I think by my 3rd job, it kind of twigged. And I remember saying to myself, I just have to do things that make me happy. I really, really do, because I had to then balance out unhappiness, work, unhappy. What is it worth my going to work and being unhappy, or should I just stay at home and sort of like just, laze around, but be happy? Are these the 2 alternatives that I've got? Isn't there somewhere in between? So finding work that I enjoyed was the answer. When I did, I never got depressed. I was self-employed in the music business with my ex-partner, and it was brilliant. We were meeting artists, we're doing things that we loved. I just never got depressed, and I just couldn't work that one out. But I thought, wow, it means that my equation was right. Do something that you're happy, Joy. And funnily enough, life works out okay. And that's what I've done ever since. Even becoming a therapist in my early 40s, Pete. It was quite late in life that I came to this. It's like, I monitor my moods and I allow them to tell me whether I'm happy in my job and my work. And I love doing what I do, even though it might sound on paper a bit depressing thing to do, working with people that are unhappy. But my fulfillment is seeing them become happy and content and purposeful and putting the meaning back into their life. And the light, as I like to say, coming back on.
Yeah, and thank you for, once again, for the work that you do, because you're obviously working with people who are struggling, are stuck, and literally creating a space where people are able to look at things differently. Because we know people don't really change when we tell them what to do. They change when their perspective changes. What I have observed is this kind of carrot and stick mentality that most people have been brought up, you know, the idea if you do this, you get that. And if you don't do this, you don't get that. That doesn't really bring out the best in people. There's never been a more important time for us to find out what's really important to people. And often it's just simple things: feeling valued, feeling supported, being heard, being spoken to, and cared for. You know, we often see people when they feel that they're a part of something, they go above and beyond what they would normally do. And we've seen this rise in something called presenteeism, where people are at work, but they're not really present. And maybe it's partly because they don't feel valued, or they're stressed. You know, I'm just looking before we started talking, that we know that some of the data shows that in 2020 was the most stressful year in the history for the global workforce. You know, in 2020, when did COVID kick off? I mean, this data was actually before that, right? So what about, we've all gone through this. There needs to be a complete overhaul. We can't pay lip service to this. This can't be a tick box exercise. You know, I was triggered when you said to remember being burnt out. I was diagnosed with chronic fatigue and ME in my 20s, and that was because I didn't really know how to look after myself. I really didn't. I've got a lot of energy, which most people can see, but I didn't know how to deal with it. And it was really difficult because I'd look fine on the outside, but inside there were days I was thinking, you know what, I don't even know how I'm going to get through these days. I remember having to move back to my parents because it just was so difficult. I remember even saying to my mum, you know, I want to go to sleep. I don't want to wake up because I'm sick and tired of feeling burnt out. And unless we encourage people to take responsibility for their well-being, then what will happen? You know, people will just go on repeat. So I hope that everyone that's listening to this can really see, yeah, we do need an overhaul. And I've seen some great examples of this where organizations have completely 360'd their mental health services. And it isn't just been about creating environments where people feel comfortable speaking up, but it's also environments where well-being becomes the norm, where people every single day, they want to improve their well-being. They want to have what is known as a growth mindset. So guys, if any of you have got any questions, feel free to put those the questions in the chat. You know, Joy, before I throw it back to you and we start looking at some actionable steps, a lot of the work I've done with athletes has been really fascinating, because the greater athletes are the ones who have no issue at all in talking about what holds them back. They have no issue in talking about their stress. They have no issue about talking about their weaknesses. And I'm curious as to why you think humans struggle to share where they're weak and where maybe what's holding them back, why we try and hold on to that and don't want to show it to the world. I'm curious as to what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it's nice that you picked on the athletes. My partner is a musician, and this whole idea about being able to receive feedback and wanting to be better, those two groups, and I've met dancers, they're in that space. It's just creative people. They just want to be better. So, and human beings, isn't that what we all want to be? We all want to improve. We all want to be better, get to the end of our lives and we say, we're done. We did it all. We gave it our all. So it's mindset, for want of a word, you know, our approach to life, our attitude. But yeah, I want to be the best. So you mentioned about being burnt out in your early 20s. Snap, you know, me too. But I was doing things that I hated. So I didn't actually work that hard, Pete. It might be a case that you were doing something that you loved and you worked hard. So it's getting an idea that, yes, you go into the world of work, game on. You're not meant to like work flat out and burn yourself out and work, you know, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And the reward, which is money, the monetary thing, is always there, that little pot of gold at the end of the rainbow to keep pushing you. But really, you have to decide that I do want to improve, but this is how you do it. And when you do first have your first encounter of fatigue, you know, being you know, diagnosed with MS, or being diagnosed with what's the stomach stuff that
Chronic
happens?
fatigue.
Yeah, chronic fatigue. That's the ME, isn't it? It's not MS, yeah. ME. But also just having problems with your digestion. So people get Crohn's disease and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Again, if we're looking at the fact your brain and your body are talking to each other, my God, don't you? If I'm unhappy up here, Pete, I can't possibly think my body's going to be happy.
Yeah.
And if my body is unwell, it's got to tell my brain that it's unwell. And there's just the fact that we don't let the two communicate with each other. But for me, Pete, you know, that whole question, athletes, musicians, purposeful, purpose-led people, big missions, big ambitions, big goals, knowing where they're going, and the feedback that they get, they say thank you. My partner says thank you for the feedback. I wasn't taught to get feedback. I sort of like hid from criticism, but you need the feedback so you can grow. So I think they just have a different attitude towards self-improvement and self-development.
Yeah, and we should never expect that of people. If we're employers, we should be encouraging those types of environments, and that often involves us putting our hands up and sharing the experience of being ourselves. Because if you don't share it, you keep it bottled up inside, and nothing really ever changes. So I think we've definitely painted a picture that the need for an overhaul, really what people want, they want to feel valued, they want to feel they're a part of something. The data around this shows that we need to start doing things differently. We need to become a lot more people centric, people focused, which again is something that Joy and I spoke about before. So let's kind of dive into the last element around this, around actionable steps. Can you tell us a little bit about what you mean when you talk about people focused? What does that mean to you?
Well, Pete, you know that I like to research things. I like things to be trendy and up to date and all that kind of stuff. So I hopped onto my favorite place, of course, LinkedIn, but there's lots of information on LinkedIn. So I just typed in basically workplace, I put down stress, and I found a couple of people who I'd like to share you some information that I came up with. I found an organization called the World Wellbeing Movement, and they're part of the University of Oxford. So these are people that care about mental health, care about human beings, and they're doing things, and they're working with companies to actually just roll out this, we care about this idea about burnout. I mean, they've got down here just reports from the Gallup reports and stuff from McKinsey Health. You mentioned Deloitte, just around the cost. So I just found World Wellbeing Movement. I thought, hey, tell everybody else about it. Why not? You know, and then I also found someone who had some really great stuff to say about the fact we're in the digital age. And I thought, yeah, we're living in an age when you're right. Work was that perhaps I worked on a farm, and then I had to work in a factory, and now I work behind a desk with a laptop. Are they different? Are they the same? But with the digital stuff, we got AI coming in, which is going to displace people from certain jobs. And this gentleman was saying that we got to retrain people and retrain them quickly. And I was sharing with you, Pete, that I used to be a secretary and a PA, and I used to use typewriters. People probably wonder, what is a typewriter? Well, that went out of fashion, and I had to retrain on a computer. I hated it. I was so angry. Why do I have to use this thing? Why has it got this screen? Why is it whatever? You know, but I got used to it, Pete. And now I'm very happy. So retraining has to
Yeah.
happen. And we have to also give people the kind of skills that they need to work alongside AI, not work. It's scaring people at the moment. People are going to be made redundant in all kinds of ways because the machines will take over certain tasks. They're not that smart machines. So we still need human beings. And there are things that human beings can do that machines can't do. And that's what we have to capitalize on. So things like critical thinking and creativity, fair enough, complex problem solving, even judging things, being able to judge things. So I know computers can be programmed, but they're only as good as the people behind it, Pete. You know, we still need people, and we should therefore be taking care of us, beginning to value this brain that we have, not trashing it and then bringing on the next one. I'm not a vacuum cleaner. That's what I used to feel like in my 20s. Break me down, put me in the cupboard, get another vacuum cleaner out. Joy your history. I don't think we should be treating human life as being disposable, like my big racer.
Yeah, no, I like that. I like that, you know, as an actionable step. If you think about, first of all, I wrote that down, that whole retraining element. I think, again, everyone here must notice we need to retrain. We need to really think about this differently and then act. You know, there's knowledge. I can't remember who said knowledge is great, but it's only potential power. The power is bringing knowledge into play. And if you think about the upgrades, and I don't know how many, I remember queuing up to get the iPhone. Overnight, I queued up for it. I mean, what was I doing? Because literally, I think 2 days later, I just could have walked in and got the phone. But these kind of upgrading that we're looking for with our technology, the upgrading of us, and I suppose the actionable step is making people aware within an organization that we do want to upgrade you. We want you to become more aware of how you're thinking and feeling and how that is affecting your performance. And then this kind of, as you pointed, you discussed about this homeostasis, that how much of your day are you actually spending in this stress mode? In fact, you know, talking about technology, we know how human beings, we're not really switching off. We're kind of on all the time, which is creating a stressful environment within the body, a toxic environment. So I think that's a really important actionable step, that we start off with looking to create the environments where we're saying to people, look, this is how we want you to approach yourself. This is how we want you to manage yourself. And then I think another huge actionable step is having ambassadors. We call in many organizations, and this is one of the areas that Trigger specializes in the first aid, mental health first aiders, having these ambassadors within organizations that are literally not just looking to apply first aid, you know, in terms of helping people who might be struggling, but also helping people who are performing well, but who want to perform better. And again, before I pass it back to you, you said something really interesting before about what human beings want. The man who won the Nobel Prize in 1937 for his theory on something called syntropy. And all syntropy means is that every living cell lives for one reason. It lives to grow and express itself fully, but it might not. It just might not. You look at trees and animals, they might not be able to fulfill the potential that they have through the environment that they might be in. But the difference between everything else in nature and humans, in most cases, is just choice. And it's very easy for us to continue to make the same choices, think the same way, and keep having the same results. And a lot of people call that the definition of insanity. Rather than, hang on a second, we recognize how you're thinking and feeling. This is how we would like you to think and feel. We want to encourage you, to do that. So I want to throw it back to you, and just in terms of actionable steps, you mentioned again before we started this webinar today about some of the other things that you've observed that kind of are needed, that would be great steps for organizations to take. Do you want to just shed a bit more light on that for us?
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. And thank you for mentioning about just that whole thing around value. I think if we're going to put the word resource in front of it, human resource, artificial intelligence resource, I think I want to be the kind of employer that values the human resource. I just want to be that. And that's acknowledging that I'm a human being too. Of course, I'm using all the machine stuff around me, but I like human beings. Human beings are emotional creatures and we need each other. It's nothing, nobody can change that. Nobody can change that. I think we have to keep that at the forefront of everything that we do. I think what's happened is we've forgotten that. And if someone forgets it and then you join a company, you assume that you're meant to forget it too. Before you know it, you do have a whole chain of automatons all doing the same thing. Oh, I meant to forget that. So leave your problems at home. Oh, how do you do that? Because my car just broke down and I've had to like catch the bus, 3 buses to get here. That's a bit hard to to forget. Oh, my child's not well. Oh, how can I forget that? Leave yourself at home. That's impossible. So you're right about the mental health first aiders. I've got my own opinions on whether that's good or bad for them, because I think it's a tough job. I trained to do this.
Yeah.
I absorb a lot of stuff, but mental health ambassadors, if they are encouraging you to look after yourself and do wellness practices, that's different. Because now
Yeah.
you've got a different culture that's rolling out about self-care, 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 self-care. You do the work, yeah, any problems, what's it creating? But I don't think we can make someone in a company responsible for that huge element of human psychology. Even I practice that every day, and it's not easy, Pete, okay? But back to the question, I found some stuff around how improvements can be made, Pete, and I've got about 10 items. I'll just quickly say what they are.
Yeah.
Introduce a personal growth budget. So provide employees with an annual budget dedicated to their personal growth. That sounds nice, doesn't it? Lovely. Flexible work arrangements. That's come in by mistake because of COVID, but we've all found that we like it within reason. But people also want to be around human beings. So let's not forget that human beings like humans. So how we square that one, but that's sort of in place. Human-centered workspaces, redesigning the workspace to be more human-centric. Talking about furniture, natural lighting, plants, well, purposeful work. Now that's what struck me. We need to know how we contribute to the whole. And when you have that purpose, you can be more fulfilled. Peer recognition programs, mentorship programs, some things like encouraging play, downtime. Now, for me, downtime is important when you're trying to absorb information and be creative. You do actually have to be in a play mode. You cannot be in a stressed mode and create, because your brain is only, as you said, Pete, designed for one thing, survival at that point. Volunteering opportunities, companies do put that in place at the moment. They allow you time off to go and volunteer in the community and feel that you're part of something whole. Again, mapping out your career mapping. Do they want you to move on? The companies that I work with and that I've read about do encourage you to be the best that you can, because they know that you'll move on. They shouldn't be afraid of that. And then this kind of transparent and open communication, which we're all pretending that we're doing, but we're not quite doing. That's me, Pete.
Well, thank you so much. There's so many things organizations could do. And I think as my dad used to say, if you're going to do a job, do it properly. If you decide to implement some strategies around improving the well-being of people at work, then go for it. It's so easy to pay lip service to these things. We'll open it up to some questions in a minute, but I once again want to highlight and thank Trigger for putting on this event today. If you don't know about Trigger Hub and the work that they're doing, please check them out, because really what they're doing is they're helping organizations revolutionize their mental health services and creating empowered environments where people feel comfortable to speak out before things become a crisis. And I've seen firsthand how they really understand some of those barriers that stop people from speaking out. And not only that, but then building roadmaps for individual organizations to go on a journey to create these cultures where well-being is the norm. People become aware much quicker of how they're thinking and feeling, and they've got tools, techniques, and strategies to move through what is difficult. Because, one of the things I've observed about you, Joy, and I, as you know, I massively resonate with elements of your story, is life is not particularly easy. It's not. I think we have this idea of what life might be, but I think most people know that it is difficult and challenging, but finding some form of peace or finding some form of meaning in the struggle makes it a lot easier for people to navigate through. But they need people to hold their hands up and say, look, how can I help you? What do you need? We actually spoke about this in the last Trigger Hub webinar that we did. I spoke about the work that Martin Luther King, who was inspired by Gandhi. Gandhi said, be the change that you want to see in the world, be the organization that you want to see in the world, and then do what Martin Luther King said, which the question we should be asking each other is, what can I do for you? How can I help you? What do you need? So if you don't know about Trigger, please go and check out what they're offering the world. You can arrange to speak to someone from the organization, and they could really help you look at what you're currently doing and what you could do to really make a difference. So I'm not sure if we have any questions, but we've got a few minutes left before we wrap this up.
Pete, while you're looking, could I just say a couple
of course,
just a very short bit? Just wanted to remind everyone about what human beings need. And there's a therapy or a movement called the Human Givens, Givens, and they just talk about what human beings need. And also Tony Robbins has done his own thing about the needs of human beings. So Human Givens, we've got security, autonomy, status, privacy, attention, emotional connection to others, community, achievement, and meaning and purpose. And Tony Robbins, I like his definition of what human beings need. He has 6 items. Certainty, we need that sense of certainty. We need that sense of uncertainty as well, variety. We actually need to be on edge as well. Significance, love and connection, growth and contribution. So Pete, if you kept those things at the front of your mind, you're bound to get it right.
Well, there's a very famous TED talk which Tony Robbins has done called Why We Do What We Do, and he talks about those 6 human needs. I think he's only one of the only people in history that's gone over the 20 allotted minutes. But if anyone was going to do that, it was Tony Robbins. If you don't know who he is, please go and Google him. He's probably one of the most well-known people in the field of personal development. And I love those, what he calls those higher needs that you just spoke about, the growth and the contribution. That is what most people want. They want to grow. They want to contribute, but we have to create the environments where that becomes the norm. Thank you for your comments there. And also, yeah, please check out what Trigger is just saying there as well, that you can see that there's a new Trigger Hub app, which just launched. You can grab a 30-day free trial of the Trigger Hub suite right now, giving you access to endless lived experiences and mental health resources to support yourself. Go check that out. There's a link to it there. Also, check out Michelle Morgan. I did a webinar with her, an amazing lady. She is the MFHA England ambassador for mental health first aid. Thank you for your comments. Thank you. Humans also need safety, belonging, and mattering. I think that's another way of saying about autonomy, mastery, and purpose. But yeah, no, safety as well. They need to feel that they're safe. That's really important as well. Thank you, Mary. I think, was that Mary for saying that? Mary, good to see you. And thank you to everyone that's joined us today. You know, as you know, Joy, I've alluded to the fact that I'm in a very challenging situation right now in my life. You know, literally as I leave here, I go into something that is very, very, very difficult. But it's a lot easier because there are people around me who support me. And that's what people want. We don't do very well on our own, and we do well when we're supported by others. So how do we ask people how they are? How do we open up that conversation? That was Jessica. I mean, it's a good question just to ask, how are you? You know, and then you see what someone says, see what door that opens up. You never know. You could start off by talking about anything.
You have to want to know the answer.
Yeah.
Pete, and you have to remember that it could be a very deep well. So for me, there's surface stuff. Oh, I'm okay. We're all trained to say, I'm okay. Actually, there's this, like the iceberg principle, isn't it? The 1/9, I'm okay. The 10th, the other bit under the water, 9/10. 1/10 up here, 9/10 under. So it depends on if you have the time to receive that, and if you really genuinely want to hear what they have to say, because everyone's got something going on, Pete.
You're right. And I think also it's it's not just asking the question once, you know, you might have to ask the question a few times to the point where someone feels safe enough to share.
Yeah, psychological safety is the buzzword at the moment.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm just looking to see if people need guidance from people they can trust. Thank you, Matt. Thank you for interest and helpful send. Thank you very much, Helen. There's some people here that I'm fortunate enough to be coaching who've showed up here today, which is really nice. So I just want to say thank you to you, Joy. How do people go and check out what Joy's doing on LinkedIn, please? It's really, she's a real inspiration and someone who's using LinkedIn in a fantastic way with the audio experience that they now are providing. Joy, what's the best way for people to contact you?
Best way is on LinkedIn, actually. I'm there as probably Karen Joy Langley, because my first name is Karen and my middle name's Joy. So you'll find me there, Karen Joy Langley. I do have my own website, and that is joylangley.com. So you can find me via that. I'm not that visible on other mediums, Facebook and all the other stuff, not doing that at the moment. So LinkedIn is a good way to get through to me, and also on my website, because my name, Joy Langley, you will find it exactly as it is there, joylangley.com.
You know, thank you so much. I've enjoyed the opportunity to connect with you. You know, your name is not Stress Langley, it's Joy. No one's called Stress or Fear. You know, these names that we have.
Speak to my partner, Pete.
Joy is what I think most people want to feel. They want to enjoy themselves. They want to feel they're a part of something. And I think now more than ever, we do have an opportunity to be the change. And I'm not saying doing any of this work is particularly easy, but it's a lot easier where you're being guided by organizations like Trigger who have that expertise, or whether you're working with people like Joy, who really will help you look at what you're doing and look at how you can do things differently. I know from my experience, a great life, a great business, they don't just happen by chance, they happen by design. And now is the time to really look at what we're designing and how we can do things better. So thank you so much to everyone. I hope you've enjoyed the time with us today. We will be back in a few weeks. And I think without any further ado, we will end this webinar. Thank you so much.
Pete, can I say, Pete, that you mentioned about money, material things, all that kind of stuff, but even you and I definitely know that in the end, what matters are people. So my son passing on, that is the biggest loss in my life. I've gone on to lose my parents since, and my sister and her daughter, but my parents were 88. I kind of expected it. My son, I wasn't expecting it. And people are not just quiet quitting, people are quiet quitting from life. We can call it suicide, call it what you want, but when life becomes unbearable, and especially with the pressures that we're under at the moment, I call it the exit door. It feels very, very inviting.
Thank you so much for just being so brutally honest about, you know, where you are and how you've moved through the world through challenging times. And I appreciate you. Looking forward to connecting with you in the future. Once again, thank you to everyone that joined us today. We will be back shortly, and whatever you're doing for the rest of the day, have a great one. We'll see you soon. Bye.